A brutal Denver storm can hide a lot of sins, but it can't bury the one failure a legendary detective has spent years trying to forget. And tonight, he finally told me why. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a like. This case goes places you won't expect. The wind roared against the windows of Mason Pierce's townhouse, driving sheets of rain across the glass. We sat by the fireplace, legs stretched toward the heat. My drink was a hot toddy. His was a mug of heavy, dark cocoa thick enough to stand a spoon upright. Pierce sipped with quiet satisfaction. "Not a bad world after all," he murmured. "You've earned that peace," I said. "Your career's spotless. Honestly, I don't think you even know what failure feels like." He gave a low laugh. "My friend, I've missed my mark more times than you'd think. Sometimes chance favors someone else. Sometimes I arrive too late. Twice, illness stole the finish from me." "That's not what I'm asking," I leaned in. "I mean, have you ever blown a case so badly it was entirely your fault?" He paused. Firelight danced in his eyes, and for the first time that night, something somber crossed his face. "Yes," he said softly. "Once." He sat up straighter, added another log to the fire, then folded his hands. "This was years ago, when I still worked for the Bureau in Chicago. The country was in one of those ideological storms only America can conjure: politics, religion, power. Congressman Thomas Durant, a loud voice in the conflict, was about to inherit a major committee role. Ambitious man, dangerous man, some said. Durant had married a wealthy young woman from Ohio. 2 years later, she died in a supposed accident, a fall down the stairs. Durant inherited her money and moved into her Denver townhouse, where he later died suddenly after dinner. Newspapers called it heart failure. Pierce had ignored the case until a veiled young woman visited his apartment 3 days later. Her voice shook, her hands trembled beneath thin gloves. "You are Detective Mason Pierce," he nodded. She lifted her veil, a beautiful but distressed face. "My name is Veronica Maynard. I'm a cousin of Congressman Durant's late wife. I've been living in the household for over 3 years." Pierce invited her to sit. "Detective," she said, "I know you're technically on leave, but that makes this possible. I need someone discreet. I do not want the police involved unless absolutely necessary." Pierce frowned. "What are you asking?" "To investigate Durant's death. I'm convinced he did not die naturally." "What proof do you have?" "None," she whispered. "Only certainty something is wrong." Her desperation was raw enough that Pierce reluctantly agreed. She described the household: 3 domestic workers, an old butler, Durant's elderly mother, and 2 guests, Mark Santolo, an old family associate, and John Wilson, a traveling businessman. Veronica crafted a cover story. Pierce would pose as a New York journalist referred by Santolo. Durant's frail mother would accept it without question. And so, undercover, Pierce walked through the door of the house where the congressman had died. Durant's mother received Pierce briefly, a regal, silver-haired woman whose posture alone could silence a courtroom. Age had thinned her voice, but not her dignity. She barely glanced at the supposed journalist's credentials before granting him freedom to move about the house. That was all he needed. Pierce began by reconstructing Durant's final evening. He met with the domestic staff first, letting them retell every detail of the dinner. Durant himself had served the soup from a tureen placed at the center of the table. The main dishes, roasted cutlets, a herb chicken, and a bowl of cold fruit compote, had all been served family style. Nothing individual, nothing isolated. "Impossible to poison only one person without risking all of them," Pierce muttered. After dinner, Durant's mother retired to her room. Veronica accompanied her. The 3 men, Durant, Santolo, and Wilson, moved to the study. There, in mid-conversation, Durant collapsed without warning. The butler, an old man named Fletcher, had been ordered to fetch the doctor immediately. The diagnosis upon arrival: a sudden attack, possibly blood pressure, too late to intervene. Next, Pierce questioned Wilson, a bulky, middle-aged man with that stiff, earnest manner some traveling salesmen never lose. His version matched perfectly. Durant had flushed deep red, clutched the desk and toppled. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Still, something about the study bothered Pierce. He asked to be left alone in the room and began a slow, methodical search. He checked the chair, the floor, the lamp, the window latch, the carpet. Nothing hinted at an injection, no hidden needle, no foreign object. He slumped into Durrant's chair, frustrated. "I'm chasing shadows," he muttered. And then a glint of color caught his eye. On a side table sat a large box of chocolates, harmless enough. But as Pierce lifted the lid, his brows lowered. The box was pink. The lid, bright blue, a mismatch, minor but deliberate, unusual enough to bother him. Inside, the new box was untouched, perfect rows, unopened wrappers. He rang for Fletcher. "Was Mr. Durrant fond of sweets?" "Very much so, sir. He always kept chocolates in the study. He didn't drink, so these were his indulgence." "But this box hasn't been touched," Fletcher nodded. "It's new. I bought it the morning of his death. The old box was nearly empty." Pierce's pulse sharpened. "Where's the old one?" "In the trash, I believe." Within minutes, Fletcher returned with the discarded box, dusty from the bin. This one was blue, but its lid pink, the exact opposite of the untouched box. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had mixed the lids, someone with failing eyesight or someone acting in haste. Pierce tucked both boxes under his arm and asked a final question. "Did Durrant usually eat chocolates after dinner?" "Nearly always," Fletcher said. Which meant, if Durrant had eaten one that night and the old box had held the poisoned sweet, someone had replaced the last chocolate. But who? Two guests had opportunity. Both had been in the house constantly. Wilson had access through proximity. Santalo had motive. He and Durrant had been clashing fiercely over political and religious battles. But motive alone wasn't enough. Pierce needed something physical, tangible. So he turned to the obvious next step, the doctor. The physician guarded his opinions with technical jargon, but beneath the academic phrasing, Pierce sensed uncertainty. Sudden collapses after strong emotion, possible. But there had been no argument that evening, no visible stress. Then came the question that mattered. Could poison be placed in a chocolate? Pierce asked. A potent compound might do it, the doctor admitted. Something strong, something fast. A chocolate could mask the taste. It wasn't proof, but it was a path. Pierce followed it. Pierce left the doctor's office with the first real thread in his hands. Poison in a chocolate, unlikely, but possible. That meant someone had access, motive, and precision. The next stop was obvious, the pharmacies around Durrant's neighborhood. And being a bureau man, even on vacation, opened doors. He interviewed 3 pharmacists before one produced anything notable. They had recently filled a prescription for atropine sulfate, eye drops used by Durrant's mother. Potent stuff, but the symptoms didn't match Durrant's death at all. Wrong direction. Pierce was turning to leave when the pharmacist added, "Oh, the girl who picked up the drops mentioned she had to stop by the English pharmacy next. Said she was running errands for a guest." That redirected everything. At the English pharmacy, Pierce finally struck gold. "We filled a request for Mr. John Wilson the day before the congressman died," the chemist explained. "Not a complex order, just his usual tablets." "Tablets of what sort?" Pierce asked. "Trinitrate for angina. They lower blood pressure. Strong effect. You must be cautious with the dosage." The chemist showed him a sample, tiny tablets covered in chocolate brown coating. Pierce's heartbeat kicked up. Chocolate-colored tablets, potent enough to kill in excess. He asked, "What happens if a man takes several?" The chemist's eyebrows rose. "I wouldn't recommend it. Blood pressure would plummet, collapse. Potentially fatal. Not officially a poison, but lethal when mishandled." Wilson now had the means, but what about motive? Wilson was sickly, soft-spoken, polite. No clear benefit from Durrant's death. His business trip didn't intersect politics or money. Still, something was missing. Pierce returned to the Durrant house and found the maid, Phyllis, who cleaned Wilson's room. He questioned her quietly, without accusation. Had anything gone missing? Phyllis brightened with a spark of indignation. "Oh yes, sir, a small bottle from his washstand. The gentleman thought I broke it, but I swear I didn't touch it. Must have been Janet. She's always snooping. A missing bottle. A guest with the exact tablets capable of killing a man if swapped into a chocolate. A mismatched lid suggesting hurried or impaired vision. Piece by piece, the picture sharpened, and yet something felt off. Wilson seemed too disorganized to orchestrate something this precise. And Santalo, the political idealist, had motive tied to ideology, not practicality. But he didn't have the tablets, unless someone stole them. Pierce decided to push one step further. He requested a private meeting with Veronica. She came quickly, worry written across her features. "Detective, is something wrong? I need the address of Mark Santalo." Her face blanched. Why? He barely notices the world around him. His mind is consumed with politics, ideals, not murder. "Perhaps," Pierce said, "but I must cover all angles." "I truly believe I was mistaken," she whispered. "I shouldn't have dragged you into this. Please let it go." Her sudden reversal tightened suspicion around her, but Pierce kept his expression neutral. "Mademoiselle," he said, "when a hound catches a scent, nothing on earth will pull him away. And I'm afraid, am a very good hound." Reluctantly, she handed him Santalo's address. And Pierce left Denver at dawn, boarding a train into the rugged outskirts of Wyoming, where Santalo kept a remote estate, a solitary, bleak place perfect for secrets. Pierce didn't expect easy access, but he stumbled on a solution. A simple, practical, almost laughable solution. He posed as a plumber. One small gas leak, staged by Pierce himself, earned him unrestricted entry to Santalo's private quarters. He moved carefully, methodically, until a locked cabinet above the washstand drew his eye. The lock was simple. A pick, a click, and the door swung open. Inside, rows of bottles, and among them the one thing Pierce never expected to see. A small glass vial labeled, "Trinitrate tablets, John Wilson, take as needed." The missing bottle. Pierce slipped it into his pocket without a sound. Finally, he had proof, or so he believed. Pierce finished repairing the fake gas leak, thanked the house staff, and walked out of Santalo's estate with the stolen vial pressed tightly in his coat pocket. The train back to Denver felt agonizingly slow. His mind kept rearranging the pieces, trying to force them into a perfect pattern. He now had what looked like solid evidence. Wilson's tablets, found in Santalo's locked cabinet, combined with the mismatched chocolate box lids, and motive rooted in political fanaticism. Everything pointed to one conclusion, but Pierce couldn't shake a thin thread of unease. Santalo was messy, fiery, often careless with details, yet the crime itself had required precision. And why keep the vial? Why store it openly, even in a locked cabinet? A true killer would have destroyed the evidence. He arrived in Denver late at night, and at sunrise began drafting a formal report for the Bureau. Halfway through, a soft knock interrupted him. Fletcher, the butler, stood at the door with an envelope. "From Mrs. Durant," he said quietly. "She requests your immediate presence." Pierce arrived to find her seated in a vast armchair, wrapped in a heavy shawl. Her back was straight as a spear. Veronica was nowhere in sight. "Detective," she said, "I have learned who you truly are. You are not a journalist. You are police." Pierce bowed his head, no point denying it. "You came to investigate my son's death. I ask that you tell me truthfully what you have discovered." He hesitated. Protocol screamed at him to stay silent, but something in her gaze demanded honesty. And so he walked her through the entire chain. The chocolate boxes, Wilson's tablets, the stolen bottle found in Santalo's cabinet. The old woman listened without flinching, her face carved like stone. When he finished, she nodded slowly. Yes, everything aligns exactly as you say, except for one thing." Her voice dropped, steady, chillingly calm. "It was not Mr. Santalo who killed my son. It was I." The room seemed to tilt. Pierce stared, unable to form a word. She continued, hands folded neatly in her lap. "My son was a wicked man, ambitious, cruel. He persecuted the church. He manipulated women. But there was worse, far worse." She took a breath that rattled through her frail body. "One morning, years ago, I stepped from my room and witnessed my daughter-in-law reading a letter at the top of the stairs. My son crept behind her. One swift push and she fell. Her skull struck the marble. She died instantly. Pierce felt the air drain from his lungs. No one else saw, she said. No one would have believed an old woman with failing eyesight, and so I kept silent. But silence is a sin, detective. It stains the soul. Her knuckles tightened on the armrest. When I saw him turning his attention to Veronica, that sweet, devout girl, I knew he intended to corrupt her as he had others. I could not allow it. I would not let him take another life, body or soul. She told Pierce how she entered Wilson's guest room. The businessman had once joked that his tablets could kill a man if taken in quantity. She found the vial, carried it to the study, and opened what she thought was the nearly empty chocolate box. Her eyesight betrayed her. She opened the wrong box first, then corrected herself, unintentionally swapping the lids, the very detail that had ignited Pierce's suspicion. I placed the tablets inside the last remaining chocolate, she said. Then I kept Veronica with me that night to ensure she would not eat sweets with him. Pierce swallowed hard. And the empty vial in Santillo's cabinet, she bowed her head. He came to bid me goodbye. I slipped it into his coat pocket. I had no strength to dispose of it myself. I never dreamed it would cast suspicion. I assumed a valet would throw it away. The logic was painfully simple, horrifyingly human. She lifted her gaze, eyes bright with something beyond remorse. Detective Pierce, I am dying. My doctor does not expect me to see another month. Tell me, must I face earthly justice, or will you allow me to answer only to God? The room went silent. Pierce stood there, a man who prided himself on clarity and felt every certainty collapse around him. Pierce stood frozen, the weight of the old woman's confession settling over him like ash. For a long moment he didn't speak. He couldn't. Every logical thread he'd followed had led to a different culprit, yet here sat the true one, frail, resolute, unafraid. "Madam," he began quietly, "you understand what you're saying." "I understand perfectly, detective." Her voice held no tremor. "I killed my son, not in passion, not in haste, deliberately. And I have prayed for forgiveness every night since." She folded her thin hands. "I will not ask you to lie. Only tell me, is your investigation complete?" Pierce inhaled slowly. Everything in his training demanded that he act, report, arrest, close the loop. But another voice, older, quieter, whispered through him. The voice that understood human tragedy far better than any statute. And the truth was undeniable. Her son had been a murderer. Her action, while unlawful, had prevented further ruin. And she herself had only days left to live. He bowed his head. "My investigation," he paused, choosing each word with surgical care. "My investigation has reached its end." A faint smile touched her lips, not joyful, but relieved, like a burden eased at last. "Thank you, Detective Pierce." He left the room slowly, each step weighted with a complexity no report could capture. Fletcher opened the door for him, casting a cautious glance at Pierce's expression but asking nothing. Outside, the Denver fog had thickened, cloaking the street in pale gray. Pierce walked without aim, letting the cold settle into his bones, trying to make sense of the case that refused to fit any tidy box. By evening he returned home, exhausted. I found him sitting in his armchair, staring into the fire as though the flames themselves held the answers he couldn't reach. He didn't speak until I'd taken the chair opposite him. "Well?" I asked. He exhaled. "The case is closed." "That doesn't sound like victory." "It wasn't." Pierce leaned forward. "I failed my friend completely." I frowned. "You uncovered the truth. That's the opposite of failure." "No," his voice sharpened. "I had the answer in my hands from the first clue, the chocolate box. A mismatched lid. Any person with good eyesight would never have confused them. The killer had to be someone whose vision was compromised." He tapped his temple with 2 fingers. "I knew Mrs. Durrant used atropine drops, cataracts, failing sight. The signs were right there. And yet I chased theories, suspects, complex schemes, everything except the obvious truth." "You're being too hard on yourself," I said. Pierce shook his head. A detective's greatest danger is pride. You know what I concluded? If Santalo had been guilty, he'd never have kept the incriminating vial, finding it was proof of his innocence. And still I clung to the wrong path. He gave a bitter, almost self-mocking laugh. Mason Pierce, the man praised for never missing, walked straight past the answer. 36 times an idiot. Imagine that. For a moment the fire crackled between us. Pierce's expression softened, losing some of its harsh edges. "You must promise me something," he said. "If ever you hear me grow too proud, too certain, remind me of this case." "And say what?" He hesitated only a second. "Just the words chocolate box. That will be enough." I nodded. "It's a deal." Pierce settled back into his chair, the firelight carving into the lines on his face. In that glow he looked both wiser and older, a man who had glimpsed the limits of his brilliance and accepted them. Outside, the storm finally began to break. The storm quieted overnight, but Pierce didn't sleep. At breakfast, he only moved his eggs around the plate, mind far away. I'd seen him troubled before, but never like this, never hollowed out by the weight of his own clarity. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "You know," he said softly, "I can reconcile many things. Human error, missed clues, even death, but what I cannot easily reconcile is choosing to turn away from justice." "You didn't turn away," I replied. "You weighed the truth, you chose mercy." "I'm not a judge," he muttered, "nor a priest. I had no authority." "Maybe not, but you had context, and context matters." Pierce didn't answer, but the tension in his shoulders eased just slightly. He stood, walked to the window, and watched the Denver street wake to morning. People hurried by with umbrellas, unaware of the moral earthquake that had shaken the city the night before. "She had days left," he said, almost to himself. "Maybe only hours. A trial would have served nothing, except to torment a dying woman whose only crime was stopping a monster." "You know you made the right decision," I said. He turned back, studying me with sharp, weary eyes. "Perhaps, but it's not the decision that haunts me. It's the fact that I didn't solve it, not really. The truth revealed itself only because she confessed. Without that," he stopped. Frustration flickered through him. "You're one of the best investigators in the country," I told him. "One imperfect case won't change that. It's not just imperfection," he tapped his forehead. "It's blindness where there should have been clarity, the mismatched lids, her failing eyesight, the deliberate choice to keep Veronica from the chocolates that night. I should have put it together in hours, not days." He didn't sound angry, only disappointed, and that somehow was worse. I leaned back. "Then learn from it. That's all any of us can do." Pierce sighed, a long exhale that seemed to drain his chest. "I have learned that brilliance means nothing without humility, and that even the sharpest mind can dull at the wrong moment." He returned to his chair, fingers brushing the edge of his coffee cup as though absently organizing thoughts that refused to align. "What will happen to Veronica?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "She entered a convent last night. Mrs. Durrant sent her there before speaking to me. The girl never knew the truth. She thought the congressman had died naturally, and she'll spend her life believing it." There was a softness in his tone, a glimmer of relief. "Good," I said. "Yes," he agreed. "Good, she deserves peace." Another silence passed between us, not heavy, just reflective. Finally, Pierce cleared his throat. "Do you know what the hardest part of this case was?" "What?" "Realizing that every logical path I followed led away from the truth. I chased suspects who weren't suspects. I built theories out of shadows, all while the simplest explanation sat right in front of me." "That happens even to great detectives," I said. Pierce raised an eyebrow. "Does it?" I met his gaze. "Only the honest ones admit it." That drew the faintest smile from him, just a hint, but enough to break the cloud hanging over the table. He stood, stretched his back, and straightened his coat. "I think," he said, "that today I will work. Really work. A mind must stay sharp. Idleness dulls the blade." "On a new case?" I asked. "No," he tapped his forehead again. "On myself." He stepped away from the table, leaving his cocoa untouched, something I'd never seen him do. Outside, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting a narrow beam across the room. Pierce paused in it, letting it warm his face. "You know," he said quietly, "this won't be the last time I fail, but it will be the last time I fail blindly." Then he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Pierce returned late that evening, his coat wet from a light drizzle, his steps steadier than they had been in days. I was still awake, sitting by the lamp with a newspaper, though I hadn't turned a page in half an hour. When he entered, I could tell the storm inside him had shifted. He dropped his hat onto the table and loosened his tie. "You're up," he said. "I figured you might want company." Pierce gave a faint grunt of appreciation and sat across from me. The fire was low, a soft glow throwing long shadows across the room. For a while, we both listened to the quiet hum of the city outside. "You know," he said finally, "for all my frustration with that case, I keep coming back to one thought." "What's that?" "It taught me more than any success ever did." I nodded. "You mean humility?" "That, yes, but also restraint." He steepled his fingers. "We detectives like to think the truth must always lead to punishment, but sometimes justice is more complicated. Sometimes compassion is the sharper blade." He leaned back, gaze drifting toward the flames. "I think of Mrs. Durant, frail, dying, burdened by guilt, and I think we ask people to carry so much. Some carry the weight of crimes committed, others carry the weight of crimes witnessed, and some," he paused, "carry the weight of deciding what to do with the truth." "Like you," he smiled, not proudly, quietly. "I made the choice I believed right," he said. "Not perfect, but right." Another moment of silence followed, this one softer than all the rest. Pierce reached for the poker, nudged the log, and a brighter flame leapt up, illuminating his face. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Work," he replied. "Cases don't solve themselves, and a mind becomes complacent if you let it rest on past victories or past failures." He pushed himself to his feet, energy beginning to return to him. He walked to his bookshelf, adjusted a few volumes, then pulled out a leather-bound notebook, the one where he kept records of old investigations. He hesitated, then placed it back. "No," he murmured. "Some stories stay unwritten," I understood. The Durant case would live only in his memory, raw, imperfect, human. Pierce turned toward me. "Do you know what still bothers me?" "What?" "That mismatched chocolate box. One pink lid, one blue. It haunted me, and now I realize why." "Why?" He tapped his temple. "It was the very first clue, the solution sitting quietly on a shelf, but I saw complexity where the truth was simple. That's a danger, my friend. Simplicity hides in plain sight." He grabbed his coat once more, preparing to leave. "Where are you going?" "For a walk," he said. "Clear air. Clear head." He paused at the doorway and looked back with a faint, wry grin. "And remember, if you ever hear me boasting, if you ever catch even a hint of arrogance, say just 2 words." "Chocolate box," Pierce nodded. "Exactly." He stepped outside, the cool Denver night wrapping around him. The streetlights cast long lines across the pavement as he disappeared into the quiet, a solitary figure sharpening his own mind against the anvil of experience. And for the first time since the case began, he walked with purpose, not weighed down by failure but driven by understanding. Thanks for sticking with this story. Make sure you're subscribed and tell me in the comments, did you figure out the truth before Pierce did?